Well, here we are once again. Welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. Hi, everyone. My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, an ad agency that specializes in political advertising to Latinx.
And I am Cecilia del Cid, an environmental and social justice practitioner, Latin American, an immigrant, community weaver, and also working in media.
An awesome person, by the way.
You too.
Okay, so today the topic that we're going to discuss is one of the many reasons. We're going to be discussing those reasons a lot. One of the many reasons why Latinx refuse to vote or keep swinging in all kinds of different directions. And one of those is there's a deep mistrust in the government. And there are different reasons why this is happening. The two main ones is, in my opinion, governments in our home countries have totally failed us. And we'll discuss this in a little bit. And then two, governments here have failed us. Don't you agree?
Yes, there is definitely a sense of there's breaking of trust, but also disillusionment.
Mm-hmm.
Estamos desilusionados. No creemos.
Sí, defraudados.
Sí,
yeah, so
no creemos.
Going on point one, and I'm gonna say para la muestra un botón, is what's going on in Colombia right now. I'm not really sure if you listeners out there know what's going on right now, but my poor Colombia is in trouble. Colombia te quiero. I hope you know. So basically, in a nutshell, what's going on is, first, the government wanted to pass a new tax law in which they were raising taxes in different products and services and surcharging it in products that were exempt from taxes. They also wanted to raise property taxes. So these are basically raising taxes in the middle class, and in the middle of a pandemic. So obviously, people were very pissed off, and they started protesting, risking their lives really, because Colombia is not really as far as in the vaccines situation as the US is. So basically risking their lives, going out to protest, and they were met with heavy response from the police force and the military. The media has been very mixed in the way that they treat this.
Yes.
And what you read in the media and what you see on the ground and what you see in social media is very different, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that those are one of the things that we have, like, through the transcurso, no, through the life of these conversations, we have been trying to highlight why it's important to have a platform, why it's important the work that you, Clemencia, do, why it's important to portray our candidates the most transparent and honest way that we can. Some are, some aren't, right? But the political advertising, the political campaigns shape perception and shape discourse and shape how we understand the problems or conflicts.
Yeah. So, right. Just to give you an example, I've had the members of my family have sent me videos in which military helicopters are shooting at unarmed civilians. So these entities, and I'm sorry, because I am, this kind of makes my blood boil. These entities are supposed to be there to defend the people, not go against them. So, Colombians have been through enough, right? Mafia, a 60-year civil war, government that doesn't work for the people, and police force that is so underpaid that they are easily bought. So, I'm sure everyone out there, the listeners, I'm sure everyone out there knows a Colombian. Colombians are everywhere. I've met Colombians in Japan that live in Japan.
Yes.
I met Colombians in every single place. Why? Because for years we've been running away from this mess. And
Yes.
then we come here, and guess what? How are we going to trust entities in government? How are we going to trust the police? How are we going to trust the military? How are we going to trust our politicians? I mean, many of us just keep our heads down, don't want to call attention to us. I'm just not gonna vote. I'm just gonna keep quiet and hope that just things go the right way, because at the end of the day, our voices weren't really counting. As you can see, people are trying to make their voices heard by protesting, and they're being shut down. So,
Yes.
What makes you think that you're gonna go to another country and things are gonna be different? So this is the dilemma. I think I don't doubt that many Latinos have the same dilemma.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this, once again, I think brings us back. This is a very clear example that brings us back at things that we have discussed in the past. People come here in the hopes, leave their country in the hopes that they will find a better life somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So some people are migrants or immigrants by a spirit, that some people who have a place that citizens of the world in that sense, and they want an adventure and they go. And many people don't mind traveling, but will always have their roots. The people who live in status of fleeing war, fleeing chaos, fleeing poverty, fleeing climate change, are doing so in the hopes of a better life. Right?
That's
or
right.
in the hopes of going to a place where they can rebuild. So the United States, when we talk about the American dream, has played itself as, and you said it in other parts, like a beacon of democracy, a place in which you will come and your vote will count. But then when you come here and you begin to really look at the systems and realize that so much, that there is something called the United States exceptionalism, right? Like the rules that apply to other countries don't apply to the United States when U.S. citizens U.S. citizens think of themselves, but also so much of what the United States foreign policy has done has caused many of these relationships, right? Like when we think about what is, when we think about what you think, like the military is supposed to be there to protect the citizens, right? When I think of the military, I think of let's say there's an earthquake or there is a flood,
right,
and a bridge gets wiped, and in Guatemala el cuerpo de ingenieros del ejército, the engineers of the of the army come and they put the fake, the temporary bridge, and they rescue people. Or in an earthquake, they're the ones, the first responders, right? That's what we think.
Right.
But also think about who has funded the Colombian military, for example, and for what purpose, and who are they defending now? Are they still the defenders of the citizenry, or are they defenders of private industry,
international interests,
other international interests? And I'm sure Colombia is not exception, but I was reading something like the productive lands are held by 0.4%. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2/3 of its productive lands are held by private owners. 2/3. That means that the 1/3 is split amongst everyone else who es un pequeño productor. Mm-hmm. So it's like 1 out of every 250 Colombians owns that much.
That's not even the 1%. That's even less than the 1%. No,
it's a 1/3. So
yeah.
When we think, and that is probably not unique. I don't have numbers for Guatemala, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were right there. So I just want us to think about what are the systemic things that happen in this country, the United States. How the way in which people influence policy get to positions of power, and they replicate many of those things. That's not to say that our own countries don't have their own histories, their own context, their own shapes and forms of white supremacy, rotten capitalism, sexism, patriarchy. Like, that is not to say that we don't have our own flavor. But let's look at situations of power. And I think that also, as we begin to think about what does it mean to organize, and when communities think we need to come to the streets, that was what we experienced last summer in the United States.
Yeah.
And what Colombia is experiencing right now, to have agent provocateurs or people who infiltrate the protests to ignite chaos.
Yeah.
It's a strategy of the powerful, because then the response is validated.
Yeah, that's right.
Then you can attack because they are destroying private property, right? Like, they are looting. And the truth is, I always think here, I will always value, this is my personal belief, like life over property. Property can be replaced.
Oh, yeah.
Life cannot.
Yeah.
That being said, I understand what it feels to have material loss when you have put a lot of effort into bringing something.
No, of course.
In this country, many places have insurance. So if something happens to the property, it will be replaced. I don't know if that's the same thing in Colombia, right? So it might be a difference on what it means to have material loss. It might be your livelihood what you lost.
Yeah, exactly. And right now in the city where I'm from, Cali, there's so many businesses and buildings that have been burned down. And of course, I'm not going to get into who did it because, everybody says something different. But I've seen videos of owners of businesses outside howling because they've lost their livelihood.
Yes.
And I'm sure that that's happened here as well during the protests last summer. So everyone watching, all Latinos that are here in the United States are watching all the stuff that's going on here and saying, what is the difference? What's so different? We're still being oppressed here. There's still insurrectionists in the inside of the protests trying to create discord. There's still businesses being burned down. What is so different? Why should I act in this country if it's just the same as where I'm from in terms of, obviously, in terms of political unrest and things like that? Obviously, there are many upsides. I'm not saying that, we're here and everything is totally the same. I'm sure, people have better jobs and are able to support themselves better, and there's maybe better education for their children, and there's more job opportunities and all of that stuff. I'm not invalidating, being an immigrant and coming to this country and seeking that better life. I know that even though it's hard work, people feel that it's still worth it to come here. However, in terms of getting involved in, political discourse and involved in campaigns and voting and being, involved in the community, that's where, here comes the imbalance of why should I do it? Why should I do it if it's going to be the same as in my country?
And I think that this is when we can kind of like make a calling back to maybe a call for hope. This country has had, and our countries too, big movements, grassroots movements, movimientos de base that have been the infrastructure and framing for structural change. I think for me, coming here and learning about the civil rights movement was transformational. I am always thinking about what it would take. I think of leaders like MLK and the amount of the power of mobilizing. And I think Guatemala has 17 million people. What would it take to to inspire, to ignite hope in half of that population, right? So I admire the possibility, the organizing experience. I think many groups in the United States, immigrant groups, indigenous groups, Black groups, there's the feminist movement, have a lot of experience mobilizing, organizing at the base. It's powerful. I think they have understood that we cannot do this on our own.
Yeah.
I think that in our countries, media and propaganda has done a very good job at instilling a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And even in spite of that fear, when I think of the Guatemalan 36 years of war as well, right? Civil war, there was a lot of people who put their lives on the line because they have the possibility of not fighting. Like, the possibility of not fighting was much more terrifying than losing your life in the fight. And I know that that is scary.
Yeah.
And I know that that is something that we are tired of doing. We don't want to die to fight because we want a better life. We're not asking for a wealthy life. We're asking for the basics. And we talked about this here before. We're saying we want to be able to have a family, whatever shape that family has for you. We want to be able to educate our children. We want to be able for our children to play safely in their neighborhoods. We want to be able to decide as a woman to go out and not feel any fear. I want to be able to practice any religion that I feel connected to. So I am not asking to become a billionaire.
Right.
I am asking to be able to pursue a productive, creative, fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Right? And even though it's supposedly to be enshrined in the constitution of this country, right? The pursuit of happiness. It's not for everyone. It doesn't cover everyone. And we can no longer sit in the sidelines.
Yeah.
Because sitting in the sidelines is also a position.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I mean, I know I'm a Colombian, so I know the experience from Colombia. I know for a fact that Colombia has a long history of unions, labor unions. And they've been fighting for workers' rights for a long time. I know because one of my cousins it works in HR and she has to deal with unions all the time. So, you know, so that spirit of organizing el pueblo, you know, like el pueblo is very strong. And, you know, many in my family, you know, are Democrats because they've always been in that way of thinking, like el pueblo is important, and the community is important and everyone deserves the same. So yeah, exactly. You know, if we were fighting for that in our countries, why can't we fight for that here? And I know that you know, many Mexican immigrants have done an amazing job at organizing. And I think what the next piece of the puzzle is not just Mexican immigrants, not just Colombians, or not just first generation immigrants or second or whatever. Everyone, all Latinos organized together for each other. Because I know that we share the same needs and wants, and we all want everyone to grow. So this is that organizing that we're looking for. And you're exactly right. Standing in the sidelines is a position. And it's not a position that we can keep taking, because what happens? We get railroad.
And I think also we tend to think
those.
I think that we tend to think that if we don't have certain status, we cannot get involved. Like if you are undocumented, or if you are TPS or a student, or like becoming part of a movement. It might be that you cannot vote. The law says that you cannot vote, and we know that the evidence shows that there is no voter fraud, that there is no significant voter fraud, that immigrants are not voting or committing fraud. We know that. The data supports that. But I think that there is a fear because in our countries, sometimes organizing is a matter of life and death. Here, it used to be.
Yeah.
I don't, when you tell the African American community how many people were lynched for registering people to vote, it was a matter of life and death.
Yep.
It's still a matter of life and death, but there are certain safeties, other types of safeties, and I think that what we have to invite our community to do is that it doesn't matter what your status is. If you have chosen to live in this country, you should get involved politically. I think that because of these experiences in our countries, we tend to think politics are really dirty, and we're like, those are corrupt, dishonest, every politician is a liar. Why would I get myself into it?
Right.
And I think that, once again, that is a position that speaks about some of our privileges. We might feel that our privilege is enough, that we can just slip under the radar. I am gonna, I am not being affected right now. No one I love is being affected. So I'm just gonna be invisible and just not call attention.
But we are.
When we
are being affected, even if it's indirectly. I mean, we're talking about healthcare reform. We're talking about minimum wage. We're talking about just so many ramifications that are directly and indirectly affecting Latinos. COVID has affected Latinos so much just because they're essential workers. And it's just, we can't just sit there anymore. And there's so many ways to get involved. If you are undocumented, you can still volunteer for a campaign. You can still tell your family members that are documented to vote for a certain candidate, to help you. You can still, there's just so many ways to get involved and to kind of just take some power back. Just because you're undocumented doesn't mean that you are completely powerless. And also, people that are coming here seeking asylum, it's almost the same thing. They've gone through so much back in their homes that they're completely disempowered, and they just feel, I just need to get, my life back on track, and I'm just gonna put my head down and hope for the best. But at the end of the day, there's so many causes to fight for. You can fight for other asylum seekers too, and there's just so many ways to get involved, and it's just getting involved in whatever your flavor is. You don't need to run for candidate. Whatever flavor you choose to do, you can still get involved.
And I think that that's conversations many of us don't really even know. Like, what does it mean to run? Because I think campaigns, especially at the local level, are definitely run very differently in this country. Just because you have federal elections, and then you have state elections, and then you have your local elections, and there is so many kind of these three levels of government that
city council.
I think many of us, at least in Guatemala, you have your elections every 4 years, right? And I think most people picked alcalde, like mayor, or like diputados, congressmen, in that election. And then we kind of forget, we don't vote for the next 4 years unless like a special thing happens. So we don't have a lot of comprehension of the process.
Right.
So that's when having someone like you who can say, okay, or like, and we're gonna have, I think, as we are thinking about these conversations, some guests that could help us, inform us, guide us of how we can get involved.
Yeah.
Because at the end, that is what we're trying to do, to really explore what are some of the barriers that prevent our community from getting activated, and what are some of the things that we are concerned about, and what are some of the things that are just like our ignorance. We don't know how the system works, so therefore we don't know where we can volunteer. We don't know where we can plug in ourselves.
Right.
I want to tell you, for example, I have done once canvassing. It was really scary, like knocking on doors. I've done it twice. I once did it for like the day of the elections, like, don't forget to go to the, like, just don't forget to vote today. And I felt every door that I approached, and I was alone, and it probably would have been different if I had a pair. It was not my cup of tea. And then I did it with someone, and we were like, and then I did it with someone else, and it was like, oh, have you heard about this candidate? This is her platform. And like most people are really nice, but I was just like, put me somewhere when you want me to stuff your envelopes. I don't wanna go to a person's store. But I tried it, right? I put myself in the discomfort of what it means to do canvassing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Some people are I've had young people come to my door and be like, I am here from so-and-so state, and I am here to ask you, who are you gonna vote? Yeah. Like, I'm here for so-and-so. And you're like, good. What are you doing? It's like, no, so people who get on the bus and who go from state to state, bless it.
Yeah.
But there is a space for every single, like, there's people who do phone banks, there's people who send postcards.
There's people who get on the phone to get donations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also people who are, I would say, I would probably do better if someone told me, shuttle people to the urn. So I'll be like, sure, I'll pick you up, I'll take you there, I'll take you home. I will be a chauffeur, that, I can do that.
Yeah,
but like,
and that's a great point, because you don't have to have a party affiliation, and you don't have to sway people into voting for a specific party or candidate. All you have to do is get involved to just get people to vote, because I personally don't care who you vote for, as long as you do. That's the most important part. I personally care about
who you vote for, but I will settle for everyone should get involved.
Well, of course, I mean, okay, I am a Democrat. Yes. I work for Democrats. Of course, I care, but
I know.
Well, you know what I mean. I'm just trying to say, just vote. That's all I care about, really. Eventually, once you start voting, let's talk about who you're voting for.
Yes,
but it's just the emotion of getting started, of registering. That's such a powerful thing, and people don't. They just take it. They just think it's just not going to do anything, and this is like, I sound like a broken record. This empowerment around voting. It's like, no, and because it's like, everybody's in Colombia that I talk to, they say the same thing. It doesn't matter who we vote for. We're basically voting for that same guy that was our president like 10 years ago, but it just reincarnated in another person and another person and another person. And it's it's the same thing, people just feel the same. It's like we're voting for like dynasties of presidents here, and it's just, there's, so in a way they just feel like nothing is going to change. Even if they vote, nothing is going to change.
I have two things to say to that. Like in Guatemala, we say that voting for el menos peor, which is terrible. Yeah, you feel like you don't have a good option.
I heard that here too.
And yes, and also I think that you're saying about what does political power mean, and we have political families in the United States. Mm-hmm. The Kennedys have been one, the Clintons have been, the Bush have been. These are families who's like a lot of members and generation after generation have been involved in politics and in power in politics. And maybe it's time that we begin to support candidates that have an idea of what it means to be a regular citizen with regular citizen, problems or issues to address. Because if you haven't worked for minimum wage ever, and neither did the last 3 generations, before you have no idea what it means and the trauma, how traumatic it is to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week and not being able to survive.
And that was a big scandal in Colombia 2 weeks ago, in which they were asking the minister of one of the ministers of economy, don't you know how much a dozen eggs cost? And he didn't. So it's like it's exactly like the parallels are just impressive. If you don't know how much the middle class or is spending on food, how are you going to understand the middle class? So it's the same. The parallels are just uncanny, and people see it. This is not just like I am seeing it. Everyone is seeing it, and this causes for people to just say, you know what, I'm all set here.
we have to stop thinking. So there is this big protection of the elite class. Obviously, they have a lot of resources to lobby, to buy government officials in our countries, definitely to buy, to impose, to support, to finance. Here, they still do it. There is a little less. Maybe it's a little bit more shame. They're losing a lot of that veil. It's coming more and more true that the upper class. We have had decades of trickle-down economics in which we say, we give the money to the top, they will create jobs, then the wealth will disperse down. We know that didn't work. We've done it for 50 years. The experiment has failed.
Yep.
We look at economists who have earned the Nobel, prize of economics saying this doesn't work.
Yeah.
So why
and all
are
that
we
money's tied up in some fiscal paradise?
But we also continue to so for a long time, wealth has been being transferred from the base to the top, right? We know that it's being transferred. We know that there is 719 billionaires in the United States that own, I don't know, as much money as 50% of the country or something like that, which is absolutely unethical, immoral, and ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But we also know that for a long time, the middle class has believed that they are supporting the poor and that their taxes and their contributions support the poor. Now that there is not that much to squeeze from the bottom, guess who is going to start to get a squeeze? The middle. And the middle has dwindled over the last decades as well. So when are we going to begin to have, and I think we also mentioned this before, some class solidarity? Mm-hmm. We know there is ideas that have been created about what poor people are and are not, and this idea that they are lazy, that they want to live off the system, that they want to receive benefits. We know that that is not true. We know that poor people work, and on top of working, they still need to apply for benefits because they can't survive without them, and because they make so little that they still qualify. So when are we going to understand that what keeps the economy going and that would allow us to transform into a just, environmentally sound future is to begin investing in jobs who are carbon neutral, like, education. Teachers don't spend carbon, caregivers don't spend carbon, a lot of like service industry are not carbon intensive industries. So like, when are we going to begin to put the resources back at the base? Because what happens when we have a house in which the foundation is crumbling? It doesn't matter if it's a mansion on top, it's going to crumble eventually. So I don't think we also understand how economics work. We need to put the resources in the people who actually go into the economy and buy food, pay for services, buy clothes. That is what mobilizes the economy, not the stock market, which we have also mentioned before.
Yeah. That was so beautifully put, and this is why you're on this podcast with me, because you just put things in such an amazing way. Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time.
Thank you.
So
yes, but we'll come back next week.
Colombia, I hope you figure this out. I will be there in heart. All I can do is just wish you well and pray for you. And with that, we'll leave you. Thank you so much. Please share, like, leave us a comment. Clem at latinxycpod.com, Twitter, latinxycpod, Instagram, latinxycpod, and we're starting TikTok too. Ooh. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, amor.
Bye, Ceci.